You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, Donald Trump's top advisor, Peter Navarro, was just sentenced to 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress. He has already appealed the decision. First off, how expensive is it for Peter Navarro to go through the appeals process?
It ain't cheap. Depends on what his lawyers charge per hour. But, if you have a lawyer who has any experience in the appellate practice, which is really critical if you want to appeal a criminal conviction, you're going to be paying through the nose. It will probably be at least in the area of tens of thousands of dollars and maybe significantly more for him to run this case through the appellate process.
I guess if we're looking at a 4 month sentence, does it pay for him to go through the entire years long process and tens of thousands of dollars for him to do that?
It's up to him. I
Right.
mean, what is it worth staying out of prison? 4 months in prison is no fun. 4 days in prison is no fun. But, Brian, he has so richly earned that 4 month sentence. The government, the prosecutors were asking for 6 months. I think that would have been even better because, it was only two crimes he committed. But what were those two crimes? Contempt of Congress by refusing to comply with a lawfully issued congressional subpoena that was seeking evidence about Donald Trump's crimes, trying to overturn the results of a presidential election. And Peter Navarro said, rather than comply with those subpoenas, I will break the law in my determination to hide from the J6 committee, to hide from Congress, and to hide from the American people the evidence I have about Donald Trump basically trying to bring an end to our democracy. Those are two pretty damn significant crimes.
Well, that's right. He was willing to withhold it from Congress, but not willing to withhold it from the book that he would write shortly thereafter. So as long as he was able to benefit financially from this, then he was perfectly happy to divulge what he knew. Glenn, do you think that Steve Bannon having his identical sentence, he was also sentenced to 4 months in prison for ignoring a congressional subpoena. Do you think that sentence being stayed pending appeal was usual, or was that the result of Judge Carl Nichols, his partisan allegiance, given the fact that he was appointed by Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's hard to sort of parcel out how much of Steve Bannon's windfall, being able to stay out of prison pending appeal, even though he was sentenced to 4 months of incarceration, how much of that is attributable to the fact that it was a Trump-appointed Judge Carl Nichols that presided over the case and that made that decision, and how much of it was because, these kind of crimes that don't involve violence, don't involve weapons, what we sometimes kind of batch together and call white-collar crimes, it's not unprecedented. It's not even all that unusual for somebody to remain out pending appeal. But ordinarily, Brian, when that happens is when the prosecution involves some novel aspect of a law. So, for example, it's not every day that prosecutors bring cases for somebody who fails to appear before a congressional committee, in a case involving an attempted overthrow of the United States government. There are some unusual aspects of the law, not to mention of the facts. And I think when judges allow defendants to remain out at liberty on appeal rather than having to immediately begin serving their sentence, it's because they want to give the appellate court an opportunity to make sure that the conviction is righteous. It's in accordance with the facts. It's in accordance with the law. And once the appellate court gives the conviction its blessing, that is when the person will be ordered into custody.
All right, so game this out with me for a moment. With regard to Peter Navarro, if the judge were to deny staying his decision pending appeal. So, for example, right now, the first thing that Peter Navarro did was appeal, and of course he wants his 4 month prison sentence stayed so that he doesn't have to report to prison. He wants this to languish for years in the same way that Steve Bannon's sentence is languishing. If the judge doesn't grant him that, then he has to report to prison for 4 months. And as we know, the appeals process can take years. So wouldn't it just be moot by the end of this anyway?
It would be moot. I mean, if he were ordered to begin his sentence to confinement, he will have served those 4 months long before
Right.
the appellate court resolves his appeal. But, the thing is, Brian, ordinarily, after somebody is convicted at trial and sentenced, they are immediately taken into custody to begin serving their sentence. That is the ordinary course of business in the criminal justice system. Now, um, I will say Judge Amit Mehta is the judge who presided over the Peter Navarro trial and who sentenced Peter Navarro. All hope is not lost that Peter Navarro will begin serving his sentence shortly, because even though Judge Mehta sent him home today and is leaving him out for the time being, he said, I won't make a final decision on whether you have to begin serving your sentence until your lawyer files a brief with me, making all of the arguments your lawyer wants to make about why I should stay your sentence pending appeal. So there is still a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel that Peter Navarro may have to begin serving his sentence pretty promptly after his attorney files a brief, making all of his best arguments about why the judge should stay, the beginning of his sentence.
Well, in fairness here, if Peter Navarro is denied the opportunity to have his sentence stayed pending appeal, doesn't that kind of deny him the right to an appeal anyway? Since the sentence is the thing, like since if he's going to report to prison and he still gets his appeal, it's all going to be moot anyway because the sentence is the 4-month term, and so knowing that it takes years before this appeal will actually get heard, like isn't that a denial of his right to an appeal since it would since that would be long gone?
No, because the sentence is not necessarily the thing. The criminal conviction is the thing. The sentence is part of the punishment that he has earned for committing the crimes he committed and being convicted for them. He also was sentenced to pay a fine. So,
Of
but
$9,500.
what's that?
$9,500.
Not a lot, not enough. But the criminal conviction lasts forever and can impact somebody's life moving forward. So, but here's the thing. The balance shifts once somebody has been convicted by a jury of their peers, sentenced by a judge to an appropriate term of incarceration. The exception is that somehow that person can stop from having to serve their sentence while they, leisurely run their case through the appellate process. So it really is the norm that somebody would go into confinement right after they are sentenced.
Well, to that exact point then, and let's finish off with this. Can you speak on the fact that Peter Navarro may very well walk and that Steve Bannon, who was also sentenced 2 years ago, hasn't served a minute of his sentence? Can you speak on this like kind of double standard that we're seeing for these high-ranking members of the Trump administration?
I can speak to it, but not without my blood pressure rising. Here we go. Ordinarily, Brian, when somebody is convicted at trial and sentenced to a period of incarceration, the next thing that comes out of a judge's mouth? Marshals, step him back, take him into custody. That is the ordinary course of business in the criminal justice system. And let me tell you, if you're a young man of color who has been convicted of a relatively low-level crime, snatching a purse or selling a rock of crack cocaine, crimes that need to be addressed, no doubt. But if you're convicted and sentenced to incarceration, trust me, the next thing out of the judge's mouth is step him back, and he will begin serving his sentence of incarceration. Not so with Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon, and let me throw Donald Trump into the mix, because even though he hasn't been criminally convicted yet, though he will be, he should be in a jail cell in pretrial detention, because the law provides that if you are indicted in a felony case and there's clear and convincing evidence that you pose a danger to even a single person in the community, Donald Trump poses a danger to the entire community, to all of society, and to the viability of democracy. If the prosecutors can show you're a danger to the community, then the law provides you are to be detained pending trial. But neither Bannon nor Navarro nor Trump are being detained the way the law provides they should be. So I maintain that is a deep injustice at play. I mean, nobody can accuse the system of engaging in the equal application of the law, because if it did, then Bannon would have served his 4-month sentence and Peter Navarro would be a guest of the Federal Bureau of Prisons tonight.
And the irony of all of this, if I can add to that, is that these are the exact people who are claiming that the justice system is rigged against them. They're the ones claiming that they're the victims in all of this, when, to your exact point, Donald Trump is walking free, Steve Bannon's walking free, and Peter Navarro is walking free. And if it was some black guy who was selling loose cigarettes on the street, he would be rotting in a jail cell right now. So for those people to claim that they're the victims while everybody else has to kind of suffer the seriousness of the law really puts on full display the double standard. So obviously we'll stay on top of whatever happens to Peter Navarro moving forward here. For those watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.